The wooden shovel is good. The modern shovel is better. But nothing can beat moving dirt and mining rocks over the skid steer and excavator. So I'm going to show you how to operate these machines, what each one of these is best at doing, and some tricks about how to get the most out of these amazing things you can operate in the game. First, I'm going to talk about the skid steer. You can think about it like a little bulldozer. This skid steer runs on petroleum, biodiesel, or gasoline, any of the liquid fuels, and costs a little less in materials to build than the excavator. It's a good bit easier to use and quite a bit more maneuverable than the excavator. The controls for it are also much simpler and intuitive. To dig or mine with it, you just drive the whole skid steer around, line up the front bucket with whatever you want to start destroying, and it's your typical WASD moving and steering. The mouse wheel raises and lowers the bucket to dig higher or lower blocks. The skid steer isn't always in digging mode. For the front bucket to actually start doing work, you press and hold the left mouse button. Anything the front bucket touches at that point gets gobbled up and put into its holding slots, and it does hold quite a bit of material before having to empty it. To unload the skid steer, you go up next to a stockpile or your cart or truck and click the right mouse button to dump its contents into one of those receiving inventories. In terms of the area the skid steer can actually dig, the width of the bucket is pretty much 3 blocks wide. You can almost, with a perfect position, get 4 blocks, but for all practical purposes, it's 3 blocks wide to be able to use it comfortably. The bucket will reach 4 blocks high, which makes it an ideal machine for digging tunnels, because the trucks in the game need a 3-block high space to operate, and that 4th block just gives you that little bit of extra headroom for the truck, and can also fit the excavator if you do it just right, which I'll talk about in a minute. The one thing the skid steer can't do is dig down, which is a good thing. Its inability to be able to go lower than the skid steer itself prevents you from accidentally digging up the ground in front of you and creating pits and holes that you have to go backfill. For me, I find this feature not to be a limitation, but actually helpful when I'm trying to create a level roadway. I can just go at the thing and not have to worry about being super careful on the height of the bucket. The skid steer also has some nice tricks that gives it some extra utility that's really nice. I also use the skid steer for filling holes and placing dirt. Its maneuverability and the fact that it won't accidentally dig a hole allows me to click the right mouse button and drop a block of dirt or clay to backfill areas. When you're next to a vehicle or stockpile, clicking the right mouse button does just dump everything, but out in the open, right-clicking will deposit a block from whichever slot in your inventory you have active. I've been able to pretty quickly backfill large areas, at least at the same rate I would have with the shovel. So not only does digging with the skid steer not use any of your own calories, but if you need to place some dirt, clay, sand, that sort of thing, you won't burn calories with that or use your shovel either. Now, both these things about dropping blocks and saving calories are true for the skid steer and the excavator, but I find the maneuverability of the skid steer to be just a little bit easier, for me anyway. Another nice ability of the skid steer, and one that's more unique that the excavator can't do well, is effectively dig these large pits for the industrial elevator, or really any kind of big hole you want dug. What you do is this. You position the skid steer so it's sitting over a 2-block width at minimum. You dig 3 blocks forward, so you've taken out a total of 6 blocks in front of the skid steer. With this little dynamo of a digger, you can then raise the bucket up high, drive it forward, and drop it into the hole you just made. From there, you can lower the bucket, start digging like normal, and very cleanly carve out the area for your mine shaft. Its small size and maneuverability is great for this kind of close quarters work, which is the opposite of the excavator. This excavator monster of a machine also runs on the liquid fuels and does cost more in materials to produce, but to its credit can mine and dig a massive amount of material in a very short period of time, and for moving material on very large scales, you really can't beat the excavator. But it does have its peculiarities and can be an unruly beast if you're not careful with it. The excavator will dig below ground a bit, so if you're not careful where you're pointing the bucket, you can accidentally tear up your digging site in an undesirable way. To use this maniac of a machine, it has two modes. In the driving mode, it uses the regular WASD keys for maneuvering the machine around and positioning it where you want. Pressing Q puts it into the digging mode. Here, the W and S keys move the first part of the arm up and down. The A and D keys spin the entire top half of the machine around in a circle. Because the same keys do different things in both modes, it can take a little getting used to.
I can do this. I can do this.
But that's just the start. The R and F keys move the second farthest arm up and down to get further articulation in various kinds of movement. Then, finally, the mouse wheel will actually extend and curl the bucket. So that's a lot of controls going on with this excavator.
I can do this. I can do this.
And like I said, it does take a little getting used to, but if you're gonna do a lot of mining, you do wind up becoming a bit automatic with the controls and not having to think too much every time you want to move something. Now, you can use the excavator above ground to do similar things like you would do with the skid steer for clearing roads and just general digging, but most people will use the excavator underground in their mine. To use the excavator to dig anything out in front of you, not just below you, there's a bit of a trick to it. It works best to extend the farthest arm all the way up and extend the bucket so it's pointing out away from you as far as you can get it. It's really the teeth at the end of the bucket that do the digging. So if those teeth aren't touching whatever it is you want to dig, it's not going to work. Similarly, you can get the backside of the bucket stuck underneath of rocks pretty easily. One of the best methods for using the excavator came from my mentor, Jimmy, that finally convinced me on how awesome the excavator was after watching him use it as a true master of this digging monstrosity. It works best if you start digging at the top, then spin the excavator to make it do a radial cut and dig around a circle at a given height. Once you've shaved off that in your inventory, you lower the boom down slightly to the next block and shave off the next layer, and continue on until you reach the bottommost block you want to dig. Once you've dug everything within its reach of that radial sweep, you put the excavator into drive mode, nudge it forward till it touches the next block in front of you, then put it back into dig mode. If you're touching that first block when you put it back into dig mode, it'll probably automatically dig it up and put it into your inventory. And then you can begin that sweeping action all over again. You can, alternatively, after nudging the machine forward, dig down in vertical lines. That works pretty well too, and you'll probably wind up using some combination of the sweeps and vertical digs depending on exactly what you're trying to do. But no matter what, having the tip of that bucket extended along with the second part of the arm is going to be key to getting your machine to actually work. This excavator also needs a pretty large space prepped in advance underground if you're going to use it there, which is more work, but it's also an advantage. You should have an area cleared that has a footprint on the ground at least 10 by 10 and need to have a ceiling height of 8 blocks. The excavator will technically dig a 9th block above you, but unfortunately it's above what you're actually able to see while sitting in the excavator, and I've just found that I like to see what I'm digging, so 8 blocks really seems to be the ideal height. You need to have this area pre-cleared before you put in the excavator, because just like the skid steer can't dig down below ground level, the excavator is unable to dig up. You need to already have the height cleared so the arm of the bucket can fit at that height to start digging. This additional height of 8 blocks, though, is the strength of this mining beast. Being able to chew out an area that's 8 blocks high and somewhere around 15 blocks wide with the radial sweep means you can clear massive areas with this excavator and completely fill the truck in just a couple minutes. To move this excavator around, it will fit into a 4-block high tunnel, but just barely. In fact, you might have to nudge it in there just to get it started. But trust me, it will fit. To do so though, you have to collapse the excavator up just right. Start by curling the bucket all the way in, and take the farthest arm and also pull it all the way in as far as it will go. Then lower the boom all the way down. This is the most compact form of the excavator, and is also how you're going to want to keep it if you're trying to get it into the industrial elevator. And it does fit into the industrial elevator very easily with some room to spare. You could probably even get a truck in there where the boom is. As far as which I like best, that's not an easy choice, but I do find myself having more use of the skid steer than I do the excavator. So if I really had to choose one over the other, I think I'd take the skid steer. It's just really good. Almost as good as this DadSpeed server I've been playing on that's now past day 100 and still extremely active with new people joining. Like and subscribe to get more game information, follow the playthrough, live vicariously through this video series, and I'll be talking to you later.